Hello and welcome to this episode of Pipeline to Profitability. I'm Alan Ferguson. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Service Success Academy. So today, I'm very proud to bring in our guest, Dave Rothacker. Now, Dave is a 40-year industry veteran, a leadership guide for the Go Time Success Group, an independent executive director in the John Maxwell Organization, and co-author of the book, It's Go Time. Dave is a passionate reader of business and social science books, along with biographies of leaders. I'd love to welcome Dave into the podcast. So welcome, Dave, to today's podcast, Pipeline to Profitability. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join me. We both have a passion for the industry. And I can't remember when we met, but it was many years ago at a Service Nation event via, our friends in common, Matt Michelle, David Heimer, and all the great people at Service Nation. So welcome to the podcast. Our listeners would love to know a little bit about Dave Rothacker and what is it you do, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a leadership explorer and guide slash coach at the Go Time Success Group. I also am an advisory board mentor for two groups within Service Nation. I've written a column for Service Nation now going on since 2009 every week. We call it the Saturday Rabbit Hole, a little spin on Alice in Wonderland and all about exploring and curiosity and more curiosity and that sort of thing. Um, I love to try to mix creativity with business. That's something I'm very passionate about. Wrote the book It's Go Time with Ben Stark and Chris Hunter. It's a story of how both gentlemen came out of a single company truck to multi-million dollar profitable companies and how they did it and that sort of thing. Very, very, very proud of that. Both gentlemen uh, really did a really, really good job of telling their story and uh, making it, I think, really, really understandable for that person who's in the truck just figuring out how am I going to get it done kind of thing. And
Fantastic.
really, Alan, I've been at this thing for 40 years. I could just go on and on and on, but that's kind of a capsule of it right now.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, look, we have, I know Ben Stark very well. I had the honor of working with Ben down under when we brought Service Nation to Australia. He was a great asset and a great resource for me, and a really good guy. We had a lot of fun. I know Chris Hunter well, just through our association and all the great meetings, and we've had a lot of fun together too over the years. So you're in good company there, Dave. Now, I want as I said, this podcast is for proactive plumbers, electricians, HVAC technicians, managers that want to grow themselves and their companies. And I know I probably met you online well before we actually met in person, which was probably about 10 years ago. And I'm thinking it was in Atlanta where we met, or one of the events. But I was drawn to you via I think your rabbit hole stories, and also we'll give all of our listeners some links to how they get a hold of you and read your great articles. Now, I know I was joking when I said I'm going to throw you on the spot by asking you to recommend a book, because I know you'll probably have a list of recommendations. But I was drawn to you by, I want to test your memory here. And I know we've spoken about this some time ago. EOS, Gino Wickman, and Traction, Rocket Fuel. you had a group conversation going a few years back, and I jumped on that and joined in, and you had a bunch of contractors that were exploring the EOS model, and I was so fascinated by that. I reached out and found an EOS coach here in Australia. Well, I'm actually in Houston now, but when I was in Australia, and implemented the whole EOS into my company. It's one of the greatest things that I've ever done, and then became friends with the EOS implementer, Daniel Davies, who was second or third ranked within the organization. And I have to thank you for that introduction. So that was fantastic. Do you recall doing all the case studies and everything?
Oh, I do. I do. Now, I studied it. I've never worked for a contractor that used it. I mean, I got out of this field in 2009. Um, I don't know. I don't even think EOS was around back and then,
No.
but I've studied it, and I've had a lot of conversations with contractors who have used it, and I think it's I think it's a wonderful uh, program slash tool to use.
Yeah, I consider it's an operating system. It's a way of life, a way of running your business. But I wanted to thank you for that. So today, I know you work with a lot of contractors, and we both work with some of the most proactive companies on the planet. And I'm not saying that, yeah, and we work with a lot of companies through Service Nation. So with your experience in the industry, 40 years, and I'm probably not too far behind you, Dave, what advice would you like to give to contractors that are maybe just starting out, just coming in and following this podcast, that really want to accelerate their own personal growth and their business growth? What would your recommendations be based on your experience of working with the best of the best?
I'm going to take a line out of Chris Hunter and his story. And Chris said when he originally got into the residential side of the business and started his own business, he read a book, HVAC Spells Wealth by Ron Smith. And Chris said, I read the book and I did what Ron said to do. He goes, like, what's so hard about that? Well, what's so hard about that is that people don't trust in the the experience. I'm not nothing personal against Ron. It's anybody, any of the leaders out there, but people just don't trust enough in the ways that they're shown. They figure, well, I can do this or I can cut a corner there. And no, no, I totally believe in what Chris believes in, and I also recommend reading Ron Smith's book, but I would suggest It's Go Time, our book, because this is exactly why we wrote the book. uh, Ben and Chris wanted to give back. They wanted to help the contractor who is in the single truck, trying to make a difference, trying to figure it out. And it also extenuates to the contractor who's struggling to get 3 million or the one at 7 or 10. Our sweet spot is anywhere from probably 500,000 to about 15, 20 million a year. And that's what I would do. So here's the secret. The company's only going to grow as much as the owner is going to grow. If the owner stops growing, company's done. Company's going to plateau. Isn't going to happen. Isn't going to go anywhere. It's just going to plateau. It's not necessarily that it's going to, meet its demise. It's just not going to go anywhere. And so the most important thing that I can tell anybody, and it doesn't matter if you're running a $500,000 a year company, a 100,000 a year company, or if you're running a $500 million company. And I will tell you, especially for the guys that are running the 500 million, because they think that at that point, I kind of know it all and I don't really have to do it. But if you're not continuously trying to raise your leadership led, company's going to plateau. That's very
Okay,
important.
I'm with you 100%. Just with my experience over the years, one of the most important lessons I learned is everything rises and falls on leadership. And yes, you're right, it goes all the way to the top. The other one, and as the founder and the owner of a leadership development company, which was specifically for the service industry, the other tip that I tell everyone that I've ever worked with: if your thinking doesn't change, nothing changes. And that was from my business partner at the time. And, you're talking about $500 million companies. Well, we have a friend in common, Ken Goodrich, who has such a company. And there's a guy that even at his level is still seeking learning. And that, I did a podcast with a friend in common, Mark Madison, some months back. And one of the things, when I got to know Mark, when he come down under for the Service Nation International event, I think it was 2011 or 12. And one of the things that Mark always says is, it's the people you meet, it's the books you read. Like, it can't get much easier than that, right, Dave?
Oh man, I love Mark Madison. I'm a firm believer in the people you meet, the people you hang around with, and the books you read. Absolutely. Yes. So let me tell you. Let me just offer a little, just a little sort of my insight on the whole leadership thing. Because leadership, when you ask somebody what leadership is, it's like it could, they have this like a vision in their head of maybe somebody like Ken Goodrich running a $500 million company, or like the president of the United States, or the CEO of General Electric or Google or Facebook, things like that. And John Maxwell, and I believe in a lot in John Maxwell. I'm an executive director in that organization, and I do leadership masterminds based on his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And John Maxwell says leadership is influence. So my question to contractors is, would it be of value if your CEO, your service tech, installer, dispatcher was a positive influence to your customers? Would that be of value to you? Well, who's going to say no? Of course, it's going to be of value if they're a positive influence. Not only that, if they're a positive influence on each other, or if they're a positive influence on their family, which also I count all that together. And if you teach people to be a positive influence and to be of positive influence, you're teaching them leadership. If you are a positive influence, you are a leader. So it doesn't matter. Position and title doesn't matter. One of the greatest leaders that I've ever personally worked with in my life was a service apprentice. Now, this was a large commercial operation. We worked on the largest chillers in the largest buildings, and some of the work was very intense. And when you have technicians of that caliber, they're usually high strung. So I would make sure we had this service apprentice with some of the most pressure laden jobs that we dealt with, because this gentleman had a way to guide, calm down, and support the main tech, the top tech doing the job. He wasn't a boss. He didn't try to boss the tech. He just was a very positive influence, and those jobs came in really well. So leadership is influence. Doesn't matter what the title or position is.
Love it, Dave. And I also forgot to mention, like you talked about Ron Smith and his book. It was one of the first books that I read. I met Ron Smith, I think it was around 2006, 2007, at a Comfort Tech event. That was before Service Nation started Service World. And at that same event, some of the people I met there was like I still am connected with. I think there was Ruth King, there was James Leichter from Aptura, there was the legendary Charlie Greer, who's a character. Matt Michelle, David Hyde. Like, it was just, that was one of the first events that I started to come to after being a member of Service Roundtable from about 2005. But Ron Smith was someone that I met, stayed in contact with, got his book, his audio, and just an amazing human being, and very influential for the industry. A bit like Frank Blau, who I also got to know over the years. Frank and Ron and there's so many great people in the industry, and they're all great leaders. So my take on leadership, and I got to meet John Maxwell at an event earlier on this year in Vegas. Now, one of my takeaways, because my partner in our leadership company was mentored by John Maxwell, and one of my takeaways on leadership is a primary responsibility of a leader is to develop more leaders. And that's a very important thing. If you want to grow an organization, you need to be investing in developing new leaders. And leaders can be, in my companies, I've had hundreds of staff. Some of those leaders came from the apprentices, and that was a really, really good example, Dave. So besides following the greats, and we've mentioned a few names, what other recommendations, and reading is great, getting to meet people at events is also great, but you're an expert in helping develop leaders, and helping company owners to grow. What else would you like to give to our listeners or viewers on growing themselves and their companies? Hopefully that's put you on the spot a little.
Well, to me, it really is it really is leadership. But here's an example that I think I learned the hard way. I didn't have a lot of good leadership examples coming up in the industry, and I did a lot on my own. I just whatever I could get my hands on to if I were to tell you what I did to try to get a copy of Contracting Business, 35 years ago, oh, there's a copy, and I just go grab it and rifle it and read it and things like that. What would be really helpful, and this may sound like it's helpful for the coworkers, but it's really helpful for the leaders as well, and that is to give your people support and resources. I would have died if I would have had anybody send me to a John Maxwell seminar or mastermind like the one that I put on. I never had a chance to do any of that. Anything I did was on my own. So if I would have had the opportunity to do that, I would have embraced it. So to leaders, I would say, or to people who are trying to grow, be very aware of your people, be aware of what they do, be aware of their strengths, and channel resources. Because you know what? That's going to end up saving you. That's going to end up allowing you to do more things than by utilizing their strengths. That's just going to free you up to do more things on your own. That's really where I think it's we neglect that in our industry. So another thing that I'm a student of is the Gallup organization, and the Gallup organization has the world's greatest and most intensive database on management in the world. No university, no corporation, no entity has done the research and has the compilation of data that they have. And management, my 60-year-old brain just hit a soft spot there, but one of Gallup's greatest messages is to be in contact, to be in touch with your reports, understand them. Weekly check-ins are just beyond important. And that doesn't mean the owner of a 30-person company has to do weekly check-ins with their people, but their managers should be doing weekly check-ins with the people that report to them, and then the leader should be doing weekly check-ins with the manager. But that's really critical, really important. So that, just another thing that I would suggest for leaders to do.
Agree. We used to use a process. It was called the one-on-one process, and we I had 3-4 direct reports and used to do regular one-on-one meetings. And a one-on-one meeting, it's important that if there's any issues that you're facing, they get discussed. But it's always the most important part of the one-on-one, I believe, is accepting feedback from the employee, so they can tell you, and you need to make it easy for them to critique and tell you where you can do a better job as the leader on leading them. A lot of my staff wouldn't do that, which I always encouraged it, because us leaders, we have to look. One of the other things besides the one-on-one with my team had to do one-on-one on their direct staff, and then and all the way down the chain, because we had about 100 staff, and it was important that process made it all the way through the org chart. But besides the one-on-one process, the other thing that I found really important about leadership, and we sort of touched on this, Dave, is it doesn't matter whether you're leading a one-truck company or a $500 million company. And in this industry, I mean, we've got companies that are, doing $1 billion and 1.5. There's some big companies within the service industry. But I believe that one of the most important things for the leader, no matter what size the company, is to allow themselves to be led. So what does that mean? That means that it doesn't matter whether you're the CEO of Apple or wherever, you still need to be led yourself. Once you stop yourself being led, means you've given up on learning. That company will no longer keep growing. So that's my thoughts on that, Dave. Listen, this is the bit that I knew would probably put you on the spot a little. Our listeners would love to know a book recommendation. Now, you've talked about the Go Time book, which is a great book. I was given a signed copy by Chris or Ben, I forget, or it might have even been you, back when I was still running my company in Australia. We've touched on a few other books, Rocket Fuel and Traction, and Ron Smith's great book, HVAC Spells Wealth. So what's a book that really comes to mind for you right now that you can recommend to our podcast listeners?
Okay, this is the most important book that I think every manager, owner, leader should read, and it's a book called "It's the Manager" by the Gallup organization. It is. I have spent so much time trying to find a better book, and I've read tons of them, and it is by far the best book on management I've ever read, with one exception: its predecessor. Because It's the Manager was published in 2019. 2020, COVID came around and changed the landscape. So Gallup followed that up with another book called Culture Shock. So okay, I would recommend reading It's the Manager and Culture Shock. And then to complete Gallup's trifecta, there's another book called Well-Being at Work. And that sort of rounds everything off. But It's the Manager and Culture Shock there's everything that if you want to be a good manager, everything is in that book. It's just like I said about Chris reading Ron Smith's book. It's there. It's all there. Now, if you're reading that book and you're not getting a lot out of it, then I would strongly suggest getting a coach. You need a coach, because Alan, check me if I don't have this right. You probably know a great many contractors out there that know more than guys like you and me, but their companies aren't flipping it along at a 20% net profit and, with, you know, 20% growth every year. It's not happening. Why is that? Well, it's because, quite frankly, no one's holding them accountable.
Mm.
You need a coach. You need a coach. So, if you're going to get a book like It's the Manager and you struggle with it because there is no finer book out there, then you got to get a coach. Um, I, picking out favorite books is no different than picking out your favorite child.
That's a dangerous thing.
Oh my God. Oh
I
my
can't
God.
believe you said that.
Oh, well, it's so hard for me. But when it comes to management, those two books, um, I am a huge believer in John Maxwell's book, Intentional Living. People come to me all the time, what's a good leadership? What's a good leadership book? Well, he doesn't necessarily promote it as a leadership book, but I would recommend reading Intentional Living before any other John Maxwell book. Then I would read the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's the book that I base my mastermind on. And I've had people, Alan, in my class that are freshly minted managers, and I've had very seasoned executives. And the comment that I get from the executives is, "Wow, I sort of knew this, but I had forgotten about it," type of thing, or I never realized that, or I never heard of that. And here are these accomplished executives running huge corporations that sort of took their eye off the leadership ball, or maybe never had it on it. So that's a good book. It really applies to everyone as far as that's concerned. But I have another book right now that is probably going to end up my number one book recommend this year. And for some ungodly reason, it got by me because it was published, I think, in 2020. And I just learned of it this year. And it has more power when put into practice than just about every other book out there. And the book is called Who, Not How, uh, by Sullivan and Hardy, Benjamin Hardy
Ah,
and Dan Sullivan. They wrote The Gap and the Gain,
I have read that
which
one, Dave. Brilliant,
The Gap
brilliant.
and the Gain, The Gap and Gain.
All of
Oh,
Benjamin Hardy's books, they're all brilliant. But Who Not How was the principle I learned when it comes to finding the right people to complement my weaknesses. I was going to say strengths, but and getting that right person is imperative. So that's fantastic, Dave. I probably due to time restraints, we'll probably finish off here, but some great recommendations. But yeah, anyone that's listening, I recommend any book by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. They're all good. The latest book that I've been reading is 10x is easier than 2x, another good
mhm.
read. And
Yep.
but yeah, I really want to thank you for your time, my friend. It's been great. Some great insights. And we'll conclude the podcast with just how does anyone get a hold of you, my man?
GoTime successgroup.com.
Okay.
Simple as that. I'm there on the about page with my uh, colleagues, and the easiest way to get a hold of me right there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dave. Absolute great to see you again. And I want to thank you for everything you do for this great industry. And yeah, for me, that's a wrap. And yeah, thanks for everyone for joining in to another podcast, Pipeline to Profitability. I'm Alan Ferguson and I'm signing out. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Thanks, Alan.